The following program is produced by Londonderry residents. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of the LACTV staff or its volunteers, and should not be considered an endorsement by CTV20 or its staff and volunteers.
Good morning, Londonderry. Welcome to another edition of Concord Conversations. I'm Doug Thomas, your host for today. I have with me Representative Wayne McDonald, one of our other co-hosts. And this morning we have a special guest. We have our new town manager for Londonderry, Mr. Shaun Mulholland. Welcome to Londonderry. Glad to have you here. We've heard a lot about you. I've been to some of your open houses where we've heard your story and everything. Very interesting one. So I'm going to start off by asking the same question I did before. You had a choice whether to come to Londonderry. You were previously in Lebanon. So what brought you here to take this job?
Yeah, I'm not a person who moves around from place to place. I worked for the town of Allenstown for 23 years, and then Lebanon 7.5 years, being the longest serving city manager in its history. So I don't move around from place to place. So I applied here. I didn't apply anyplace else because of the unique features of this town. It's a rapidly growing community. It's obviously a very attractive community for folks to live in, part of that Boston metropolitan area. So for me, it was I saw an opportunity for some challenges. I like a challenge. There's a lot of good things that are going on here, but there's some things that I think I can do to help make improvements and even make it even better than what it already is. So I applied here, and again, I didn't apply anyplace else, so that I wanted to try this out. Didn't know if I would be accepted for the position. Obviously, there's a degree of competition for these jobs, especially in the more attractive communities like Londonderry. So this is an opportunity for me, which we took advantage of.
Great.
There are similarities in terms of the job, no matter where you go. Obviously, budgeting and personnel issues, and there's a lot of state statutes that govern how municipalities have to be run. But there's also the unique character of every community demographically and in terms of the culture, in terms of ordinances and so forth. And I know you're just coming in, so maybe it's a question a little premature, but how do you see some of the differences between Lebanon and Londonderry? In your first week or two, have you noticed a vast difference, or are there a lot of similarities?
There's more similarities than there are differences. Lebanon is a city. It has a city charter, one of the 13 cities in our state. And then we have Londonderry is a little bit different too, because there's a town council in which has its own charter, of which there are 8 towns that have that. The rest are what I would call statutory towns. They follow the way that exactly how the statute reads. So there's more similarities in terms of the economic activity. There's a lot of similarities as well. The structure is a little bit different. There, as the city manager, I was the chief executive officer and the chief administrative officer. Here I am the chief administrative officer. But remember, I worked in a town for 23 years, and I was a town administrator there, which has no statutory authority whatsoever. But a lot of that has to do with how you work with other people, and no matter what position you're in and what level of authority, you have to build a team. You have to work with elected officials, appointed officials, and staff to make things happen. So there are far more similarities, I would suggest to you, than there are differences.
One of the, I was a political science major in college, and I remember my state and local government classes, and I think this still pertains. One of the challenges in a city or a town manager form of government, you're the chief executive essentially, but you don't have your independent power base in the sense that you were elected like a mayor is. And having worked in city government, having been, town manager and a leader in so many different communities or several different communities, has that ever been a problem, or has it ever been and it has been a challenge at times here in Londonderry. Your predecessor, for example, kind of confronted that, and I think others have as well in other communities. Did you ever confront that, or do you ever foresee that as a challenge? Or
I don't really see it as a challenge, because there are pros and cons and I've worked in 3 different types of local government, again, as a town administrator, as a town manager, and as a city manager. They're all different. You have to recognize the differences and respect everybody's position in the process. But at the end of the day, it's about working as a team to get things done. No matter what structure that you're in, they all have their pros and cons, and there's a lot of promise in the system that you already have. Sometimes personalities get involved, and that deflects off of some of that. But refocusing folks back on that, what is the mission of the town? What are we trying to do? And maybe our tools are a little bit different, our structure's a little bit different here than it is in the community next door, the one beside that. But they all actually do function. They've functioned for a long time. I mean, we've had government operating here since 1600 for hundreds of years that operates with some revisions and modifications here and there. But I don't see it as a problem. Everybody just has to recognize this is the structure that we have here, and how do we work within it to achieve the objectives and the mission of the town.
Shaun, I know that prior to you actually taking over, which was on June 2nd, you were here, and you watched a lot of videos in town of the various town committees, and you drove around town as much as you could. While you were doing all of this, in your mind, what were you focusing on as you thought you could do to help out the town?
So I needed to find out again, you talked about the feel of the town and what's the mindset of folks, the sense of community. So I was trying to get a better understanding of what that was about. I wanted to make sure if I was going to make a move, when I make a move, obviously I do a lot of research. I visited the city of Lebanon 9 times before I applied it. I first said, no, I'm not interested in that. Then I was asked to take a look at it again. So to me, that research, that investment is absolutely critical. What is the community's mindset about economic development? What is it, the mindset about preservation of its natural resources? How does it look at its people and how people socially interact with each other? What is the level of appropriateness? And what is the politics? Is it nasty, or is it where folks can work together and come to consensus and get things done? And what I've seen is, I know you hear a lot of things, people tend to focus on the negative, but I also see a lot of consensus. I see a lot of people on these boards and committees who are very interested and very passionate about their town, which to me is really, really important, because we all need them to be able to make this function and move this town forward, if that answers your question, sir.
Sure. I think you mentioned also you had some ideas about modernizing some of the administration, digitizing the town to make it easier for people to fill out forms, get permits, and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think you might go about that?
Yeah, so this is not untypical of a lot of towns across the entire country in terms of modernizing their operations. They tend to be far behind the public sector. And to me, that's very important, is to create those efficiencies. Those efficiencies directly relate to transparency and community engagement and the speed by which business and individual persons are able to get the business they need to have done with the town. So electronic processes are critical. But to me, I use lean generally. It's like Sigma 6, if you're familiar with that concept. But looking at processes and having a team that looks and breaks down a process in all of its small parts to find out where the waste is and how we can create efficiencies. To make a long story short, we're going to be creating a lean team here and sending people to training to be able to do that, and inviting people from the outside to be looking at our processes to see where we can make those efficiencies. People that are on the ground floor doing the work are part of the process of how we make that process more efficient, more effective. So that's a major focus of what I'm going to be focusing on, is getting that transparency through the use of technology to create efficiencies in our workforce.
That's actually a concept that when I was at Health and Human Services, where I was for 23 years, I retired in 2019, they were actually starting to get into the lean concept. I wasn't directly involved in it, but I heard a lot of good things about it, so that's great. I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah, I've been using that for about 10 to 15 years now. I've been using lean. I was introduced to that some time ago. The town of Durham, the town of Bedford were using lean to be able to look at their process and how to make them better. And they developed that from the private sector. Toyota Motor Corporation, Ford Motor Corporation were the folks that really did the initial work on that, and then it spread to government.
Let's focus on your management style. I get the sense that you are very open to people coming up to your office and talking to you, or maybe making suggestions. How do you see that in terms of your style? Are you going to carry forward with that, or are you going to have like open houses where people can come in as a group?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. Before I got here, there's a lot of folks who reached out to me, which was really helpful in allowing me to learn more about the community. So yes, I have an open door policy. Things are going to be hectic for the next couple of months, the first 90 days, because I'm drinking from a fire hose, as they say, trying to get as much information as I can. But I want people to be able to come and see me when they want to share information with me. But yes, community engagement, going and just having regular roundtable discussions where folks can bring up anything that they want to talk about. And I prefer to have town councilors with me as well. And then also us going to locations where people are, whether it be workplaces or senior living facilities, but where those folks normally congregate, us going out to them to develop that community engagement, because a lot of times they will not come to us. And especially younger people who are traditionally not heavily involved in government, it will be good for us to go out and find out where they are and meet with them and find out what they're concerned about, and let them also know what the town is doing and what our objectives are.
You mentioned efficiencies in government, which affects everything and critically important. Obviously, public safety is always a high priority. Economic development is. Do you have any other priorities in mind that you want to focus on? And I know there's so many, particularly in a large community like this. Any other things come to mind?
Yeah, so some things that I've identified right off is workforce development. When I say workforce, I'm talking about the town government's workforce in terms of supervisory level training, things like emotional intelligence, some of the basic things that we look at in leadership and government. Basic skills, developing our workforce, and succession planning. That's going to be a priority, and that's internal, of course, is developing that. Other than that, what's really critical is developing a strategic plan, which I'm going to be talking about. It'll be on the agenda in July, at the end of July. The elected officials should be telling the administration what it is that they want me to do. And you do that by having significant stakeholder meetings. All the boards and committees would be involved, and it takes a year to develop that. So I'm looking for them to tell me, town manager, these are the goals and objectives of the town. Go do these things, put them into practice. So we don't have one of those right now, a strategic plan. You have a master plan, right? And then you have a strategic plan that deals with more operational type of level issues. I want to develop that with the council, because it's actually their strategic plan with input from all of these groups in the business sector, the nonprofit sector, and again, all the boards and committees participate in that process. So they can tell me where they want the town to go. What is its missions? What are the priorities? How do we measure the success on those? So that is what I want to work with them on to get a better sense of that. So I'm a little bit cautious about saying what things I want to do right now until I get that guidance from them. Sure. What you don't want is the town manager doesn't run the town, right? It should be the elected officials that are providing that guidance with the citizens, providing that guidance to them, and then we carry that out, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I noticed that you made a comment when we had the open house before about the traffic in this town. Have you come to any conclusions as far as how you might approach that with the town councilors?
Yes, so there's a couple of approaches with that. One, I've already sent out a draft policy on traffic management. That's to deal with more like acute issues. If there's a problem in a particular neighborhood, to address citizen concerns. So there's a form to provide that input, and then the approach that we take to address that, and then we provide that feedback back to the individual. The Traffic Safety Committee is a key component of that. That's one approach to that. The other approach to that is corridor studies. And we have some major corridors. We have High Range Road, we have Nashville Road, we have Mammoth Road, and we have 28. Those are the main corridors in the town. And normally that's done in conjunction with DOT or those state roads. And usually you match you do a study of your zoning at the same time you're doing the corridor study. So they interact with each other. There's been discussion about having a townwide traffic management study. I don't think it's a good idea because it costs money to do that, and you don't have the money to address all those problems at once anyway, and then the study becomes old, the data becomes old. I'd rather target one area, deal with that one corridor, come up with a plan for that, and then you start to study the next corridor and the next one. And then those capital improvements plans, and a lot of those are obviously going to be hopefully in the 10-year highway plan. I think we have 13 projects in Lebanon in the 10-year highway plan, and you have 2 here. And there's a lot more traffic issues from what I can see just by driving around than what they have there. So we really need to start looking at that, developing the focus and getting resources in from outside the town to help pay for those, because as you know, they're very expensive to do.
I'm glad you mentioned money, because this town does have a very large proportion of people that are living on fixed income, low income. We have 10, 11, or 12 at last count, over 55 communities in this town. We have several trailer parks. Taxes are always the first thing on people's minds. Property taxes are going through the roof. Do you see any things that you might look at to advise the town councilors on how we can arrest some of these things and help out some of these folks?
Obviously, to the extent that we can, we want to get resources from outside of the town, bring those in. We pay taxes to the state, we pay taxes to the federal government. To the extent that we can get some of those back here to do the things we want to do is critically important. Public-private partnerships, wherever those are possible and make sense, we should be doing those as well. Creating efficiencies, take what we already have and making the best of it. For instance, the technology piece I talked about, you already have tools that you pay for that aren't even being used right now that I want to make full use of those. I can do a whole lot with those before spending any additional money. Things like SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft Teams, you already pay for that. That is the backbone of a lot of the work we would do on the technology side to be able to communicate and work effectively in a team. Property taxes, again, they're a huge issue, especially in New Hampshire, states like New Jersey, where they're very, very high. And New England in general, although we're much higher than anybody else because we rely so heavily on one source of revenue. So we've got to pay very close attention to that, because you're right, even incremental changes and increases in property tax have a dramatic impact on folks who have fixed incomes. But people starting out as well, even they may not be low income, but they're just starting out and they don't have the resources. And again, when you make those incremental increases in property taxes, it directly impacts their bottom line as well. So that has to be looked at very carefully. What is the long-term plan? We used to project 5 years when I worked for the city of Lebanon. You don't do that here yet, but I think it's important that we start looking out at what the long-term plan is, what the property tax rate increase would be based upon our known contracts, labor contracts, debt management, and those sorts of things. So there's a lot of pieces to that. There is not one silver bullet that comes to deal with property taxes. There's a lot of components that have to be put together to try to manage the property tax problem, because it is a problem.
Right. So you're many months away from this right now, but we will be, as soon as the fall goes towards the holiday season, we'll be entering the budget season. What would be your method of interacting with the town in terms of looking at the budget and how we can do things during that time frame? Do you see anything different here that you might have done differently from Lebanon?
Yeah, so the strategic plan drives the budget. So budget really is a cycle. There's no beginning. It's just how the cycle moves around. So we approve a budget up in the city of Lebanon in December. In January, I start the strategic plan update process. In April is when we have the workshops for the town council, and this is after the feedback from the boards and committees and the citizen engagement sessions. So that strategic plan is what drives the budget moving forward. And then the council provides guidance. This is what we're looking at in the budget. In the city of Lebanon, we just did this in May. I gave them the financial outlook, and they said we'd like 3 budgets. We want a budget, a level service budget. We want a budget that is no more than the consumer price index, the cost of living, and then a budget that's in the middle. We want to see what the impact of all 3 of those budgets are when you go through the process. The way the charter reads, the city manager produces a budget for what that person deems the needs of the city are. I suggested a different process. Even though the charter requires one thing, I suggested a range of options so they know what they look like. And that gives staff time to prepare all those. So here in the case, because we have a town meeting, is the voters can also look at what those look like. And that information's all out there. It's all transparent so folks can take a look at it and see what it is. That's something they might want to think of, but I haven't had that discussion with them yet. I mean, obviously, this is my second week on the job. They really need to tell me what they would like. When I say they, the town council, because that's the governing body.
Yeah.
The reception you had, the open house at the community room of the police station, I thought was a great idea. I don't know if that was your idea or someone else's, but it was a great idea. Did you get a lot of good ideas from that? A lot of good feedback from that?
I did. Again, I've only been in a couple of other places, but I've never received so much feedback prior to getting here, which has been very, very helpful to help me learn about the town and how people are feeling about things. So it was definitely very helpful. That's why these regular community engagement sessions are so important. I work for 27,000 people. I need to understand what they're thinking and what their concerns are and what they'd like from us. They need to be able to reach out to me when they have something they want to talk about. I need to make that as easy as I possibly can. So we're going to be scheduling those. I've already had that initial discussion with the council, but we're actually going to put them on the calendar. And we also do it virtually as well through Microsoft Teams. So if you can, or you can phone in if you would like to. So if you're not available to show up in person, there are multiple means to participate in that meeting. So that, again, I want to implement those as well.
One of the things we've done in the past also that you might want to consider is the legislative delegation from Londonderry to include Senator Carson. We've met with the town manager. I believe it was, on a quarterly basis?
Pretty much, yeah.
And that was very helpful. I thought it was very helpful. Hopefully it was helpful for your predecessor and the other members of the delegation to get feedback both ways in terms of state issues, how they impact local issues, and what, you folks might, the people in Londonderry, the people in Londonderry government might need from their state representatives and their senator. So.
I believe I mentioned at the last town council meeting that it would be very beneficial, in the state legislature, there are seven and a half representatives that represent Londonderry, that half is shared between Londonderry and Windham. We have a lot of bills that come through, and I know I'm involved with science and tech, Wayne is involved with Health and Human Services, but there are many other bills out there that might affect the town that we may not hear about until at the very end. Is there a process that you might think of that could have someone sort of be on the lookout for bills when they start being introduced in the fall, that you might say, hey, this could affect our town, and then maybe you contact us and say, hey, but could you keep your eye on this particular one coming up? What can you tell me about it? What can we do about it?
So we had a very actually scripted process where I was before that I would like to at least be considered here. Every 2 years, the City Council would approve the legislative policy positions. So they would take what's provided by the Legislative Policy Conference by the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and my council agreed with some of those, didn't agree with others, and we would post those on our website, the council's website. These are the legislative policy positions that we support, these we don't support. That's the guidance for staff to work directly with our legislators to track those, and NHMA has a system by which they track the bills and provide feedback to those. So that's one way in which we would do that, because staff really should be focusing on what the town council's legislative policy positions are and not going off on their own, because policy needs to be set by the governing body with feedback from the citizens. The other way that I do that is I'll get phone calls from legislators, or I will call them when they ask technical questions. For instance, let's say it's something about property taxes, how they're assessed, and some technical mechanisms in there, and we can provide responses. Okay, we've had this circumstance and we've dealt with these. Here's one of the problems that we had when we did that. This bill, the change in there will improve that or will actually make that worse and result in litigation. So we provide technical information to legislators because we obviously operate local government here. So that's the other part of that I do. But I'm really cautious about advocating on behalf of something, because that really needs to come from the elected officials of the town at the local level, and they're the ones who should be communicating with you. And what I do is I set up the mechanism by which that occurs. But that's the right way to actually do that.
Yeah, I've heard, and I'm sure Doug has as well, from a number of the town councilors as different issues were pending, whether it was the housing issues or and Ron Dunn, the chairman of the town council, is actually also a state representative, so he wears both hats and gives him a unique perspective. Prior to him, Tom Dolan was in a similar capacity and held both jobs. And so that's also a tremendous advantage, I think, from your standpoint, that you're going to be working obviously closely with the council and Ron Dunn as chairman, he can kind of bridge that gap. And in an immediate sense, obviously, we're all going to be involved, but.
And we have a bit of a breather here. Things will be wrapping up at the legislature, at least until,
Thank heaven.
until the next session.
Maybe a couple months.
Yes, well, we have committees of conference coming up, and of course the budget to be finalized. And yeah.
That will be an interesting summer, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think both Doug, I don't presume to speak for Doug, but I think he's probably as happy as I am that we are not on the Finance Committee in either the House or the Senate. And while we'll obviously be involved in the ultimate decision on the budget, we will not be on the committees of conference for that. And I've got several committees of conference pending on health-related matters, and those will keep me busy enough. And I can only imagine what the one on the budget, given the vast differences between the House and the Senate, are, and some of the at least early lines in the sand that are being drawn in terms of what the House will accept and concede on, and what the Senate will accept and not concede on. And we, of course, in Londonderry, we have the interesting perspective also in the interesting situation where the leader of both legislative bodies are from Londonderry. Senator Carson is the president of the Senate. Representative Packard is the Speaker of the House. And good thing they live on opposite ends of town, because it might be it might be helpful.
Let's just say that there is a lot in the budget that the Senate has turned over to us that can be up for negotiation. There's a lot of material in there. People want what they want in some areas. We have excellent people in the House that have through their estimates and calculations, they feel very firm of what we might have coming in for revenues. The Senate has the same process. They feel they can get revenues from other sources. So when it comes together, there will be things in there that both sides will probably not like. And perhaps as things go, there might be some things that both sides might be willing to give up in order to get the whole thing passed.
In a $16 billion budget, there's no way you're going to keep everybody happy. There's never been a way, even in good times. And this has been a challenging budget cycle, so it's going to be even more difficult this time. But the one thing we can both I'll be very confident on, and I hope our viewers know, that everyone has worked very, very hard on this budget. The House Finance Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, there's been multiple hearings, extensive citizen input and testimony that's been considered. And whatever the outcome is, it's going to be the best possible product that we as a legislature can give. So.
The interesting thing is you have I call the art of compromise, that our state legislature has been able to do forever. At the federal government, we haven't passed a budget on time, and who knows when that 10, 15 years, maybe something like that.
For numerous years, there wasn't any budget at all.
Right, exactly. So, but our legislature has been able to come to consensus, to develop that compromise, to make it happen. So that's a credit to the legislators that we do have in our state.
We try very hard. Last session, believe it or not, the budget passed on a voice vote, which is unheard of in modern times here. We have just about a minute or so left. I understand, even though you came from Lebanon, you are not from there. You were actually from Rockingham County, and you're more familiar with our county now, which is good to have you back. Can you talk to us a little bit about coming back to your home area?
Yeah, I grew up in the town of Raymond, actually. Went to the schools there, and so again, I'm from this area, so it's nice for us to return back here. We have grandchildren that live very close by, so this weekend I was able to go to a softball game and a baseball game, which we couldn't do before because the travel distance was just too far. And there's certainly different areas and different cultures in each area of even in our own state, different regions. So it's really nice to be able to come back to what I'm used to here. My wife and I both are from this part of the state, so it was good coming home, as they say, back to this area.
Good. Any final words, Maine?
Well, as a native of the Londonderry area in Rockingham County, welcome back. It's always good to have a favorite son return. And again, Shaun, we really appreciate you joining us this morning and your insights, and look forward to working with you over the years to come. And I'm sure it's going to be a very, very good time, a very productive time.
Well, that's about the time we have for Concord Conversations. Again, welcome Mr. Mulholland, being our new town manager, to Londonderry. I'm glad folks in Londonderry were able to join us, and until next time, you all have a good day.